Hello, everyone. Welcome to the WaterCooler Wednesday. I'm David Shar, and I'm here with Tony Tenaglier, who is just an incredibly fascinating guy that we're going to get to know over the next 45 to 60 minutes. Um, Here's where you come in. This is live so that whether you're watching us from like on YouTube, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, we want to hear from you too. So if you have questions, comments, anything that you want to add, please do. It's nice to know that we're not just talking to each other, but that we're including all of you in the conversation as well. Um, I'll be monitoring all of these things. I've got you all on LinkedIn down here and everybody else over here. So feel free to chime in. If you're watching the replay, also leave comments. We can go back and take a look at those as well. All right, so Tony, um, let me briefly introduce you, and then we're going to get into our 6 and 60, which I know you've seen previous episodes, so you already know that exists, and you may be nervous about it, so we won't push it off too
Still
much
am.
further. Yeah, and then we'll get into it. So, all right, Tony Tenaglier, where there's a whole story behind this, but Tony and I got to know each other through LinkedIn and then through this other podcast connection thing. And so I ended up going on Tony's podcast, which is Work Sucks, but I Like It. And loved every minute of that conversation. And by the time we were done, about an hour, we said, whoa, 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 we like scratched the surface and that's it. We've got to do this again. And I said, but next time, let's flip the script because I want to get to know you better. And you'll see why in a second. Tony's resume, it's almost like he's living three separate lives. I don't know how he has a minute in his schedule available. And we're going to get into that and what that means, especially from my burnout prevention perspective. It's going to be, we're not going to let you go so easily on this. But Tony, by day, he's a quality manager in aerospace manufacturing. In other words, incredibly brilliant, I assume. And by night and on the weekends and every other minute of the day, he is a PhD student in IO psychology, where he's studying flow at work. He is a 500-hour yoga instructor. He is a drummer in a rock band. And he's authored two books. And he said just beforehand, oh, I'm actually working on my third and my fourth. The fact that he's even got like two additional books in his head simultaneously is pretty impressive. So welcome to the water cooler, Tony.
No, thank you, David. Appreciate it. Looking forward to this.
All right. Well, you say that, but now we're going to hop into our 6 and 60. So this is going to be six rapid fire questions. And so you've got 60 seconds total to answer them all. Do you think you can do it?
Let's do it. Teamwork.
All right, here we go. First question: in office or fully remote? Pick one forever.
In office.
Okay, what's one trait every leader should have?
Ability to listen.
Name one trait of your favorite boss of all time.
Friendliness.
When you get really stressed out and you're trying to fight burnout, what do you do? Where do you go
Deep,
to unwind?
deep breathing.
Nice. Outside of work, what is one thing that you are most passionate about?
Yoga.
Finish this sentence. The future of work is.
Scary.
Nice. Love it. You did it too. Not many people actually
Well,
get the six.
I saw a previous episode, David, so I was like, oh, I got to answer them quick. So did my
Nice. That's
homework.
awesome. And I assume when you do as
Yeah,
much as you do, that efficiency is becomes pretty important. Just to juggle it
absolutely.
all. So
Absolutely.
so let's start there. Tell us like why do you do so much? Not we can get into how, but first, why do you do so much? So many of us are sucked into our work, or um, sometimes work is not first priority, but we have a hobby that's first priority or something like that. Not many of us wear as many hats simultaneously on purpose, like you seem to be. Why do you choose this for yourself?
Yeah, right. I mean, at first it looks like I'm going crazy, and I have to admit that I have burned out, right, doing too much. And so the first book I wrote years ago, I think probably 10 years ago, it was called The Impression of a Good Life, Philosophical Engineering. That was the first title. And I realized that people judge a book by its cover. Nobody wanted to read it because it couldn't even say philosophical engineering. So I've changed the subtitle to Finding Your Song and Dance. And that's important because I found that, out of college, I was told to get a degree, get a job, get married. And it's not that those things aren't important, but there was more to sort of potential, right? So the book talks about Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I really love that. And so to me, living in New Hampshire, I grew up hiking mountains. And so when I look at Abraham Maslow's hierarchy, I think, oh, that's a mountain to climb. Why can't I climb that? Right. And find this potential for myself. And so, why do I do so much? I guess I think of it as just, again, living out my potential. Just like the acorn has the potential to be an oak tree, every day I'm just truly grateful for waking up, right? We can think of the alternative when I don't wake up. So, there's start one, right? So, just be happy with waking up. And I guess, like, building onto why so much, I like having different perspectives because as a quality, manager, as you mentioned, an author, all these other things, when I do one thing, it actually helps me to see, a different perspective when I'm doing something else. So I actually enjoy trying new things. And one of the things I was teaching last night in the yoga class, I teach every Tuesday, and I reminded the students that in this book called Laughter Yoga, there's a statistic where it's children will laugh over 400 times a day, adults less than 15, right? And what it tells me is that people are afraid to do things anymore. They're afraid to try things. It's almost like I have to wait to retirement to do this thing that I wanted to do. Why not just do it now? If you have 5 minutes, you have a minute, and you compound that over a week, 5 minutes every day. I mean, you've already got an hour or so, right? And that's kind of how I look at my day.
Wow. So there's a lot there. Um, but at its core, are you did you find that you're not able to find all of what you're looking for within one milieu? Or in other words, are you pulling different things from different areas of interests and different activities, or are you sort of pulling the same sort of stuff from life? Like, are you getting the not to put words in your mouth, but this feeling of development and growth from work and from music and from writing, or are you getting different things from different places? Does that make
That's
sense?
very Yeah, no, that's very interesting. I guess, like, when I think of the word work, first of all, like we talked on my show here, when I asked you the question, what do you do? I hate that question because we immediately label what do you do as what I do for trading time with money. And my definition of work, and it's taken me years to come to this, whether it be right or wrong, is from the physics definition where you have a force multiplied by the displacement of an object. And that's the work, right? So when I think of that, I'm fighting the force of gravity every day. I'm fighting the psychological forces, right? Where you can really spin on the word force. And it's just when you translate that and you look at it from a higher level, you're just moving your hands and feet on a floating rock around a fiery ball. It's that simple, right? And I guess, like, to me, I just
Is
see
it
great
though?
enjoyment. It's like I'm like a kid in a playground. Like when I wake up, I'm like, oh, let me go try this. Let me try golf. Let me try rock climbing. Let me write a book. Like, I don't know. I just look at it as a playground. So I guess it is a development thing in terms of, like, pulling me in life. Like I just want to really just live each day to the fullest.
Yeah. So Solomon Hassan says life crafting. Life crafting. I love it. So that's kind of what you're doing, right? Um,
Yeah.
but what would you say to people who are feeling burnt out? Their entire life is work. They get up, they go to work, they're exhausted when they come home. They go to sleep. I like to say that everybody's got their drug, whether it's illicit drugs or alcohol or eating or turning on the TV or whatever it is, just to numb themselves after a day of work. They go to sleep, they wake up, and they do it all again. What
Mm.
would you say to somebody who's living a life like that and feeling so overwhelmed and burned out? And here you are saying it's just moving your arms and feet, and you're like so happy about it. And it's like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
what about the person who is shaking their fist at you saying, damn you, it's not that easy? What do you say to them?
And it's not, right? I'm not trying to say that like it's like the Pollyanna effect. Everything is just lovely and I'm gonna bake a cake when the world's on fire, right? I'm not saying that. I guess like for me, the first thing I'd recommend to people is do a check on your phones. I'm really big on how you use your phone today. And I'll give you kind of my time with it, right? So a few years ago, I looked at my phone use. I had Instagram on there, I had Facebook, I don't even know what half the other platforms were. And I was spending 4, 6 hours, right? And a day on my phone. And I just realized, like, what am I doing? That's 4, 6 hours of things I could be doing other things on. Right. So I started to do this audit of myself on my phone, got it down to 20 minutes on apps. I had little timers set. And then all of a sudden it started allowing me to have more time in my day. And another thing with the phone is we have FOMO, right? We have a lot of things. I did my master's work looking at the effects of the Shallong hypothesis, where basically it postulated that the more you use social media, this fast-paced communication, it's going to lead to increase in narcissism, increase in depression, and a decrease in critical thinking. Right. So I was thinking to myself, well, I don't want to be a master of any of those. Right. So when you're online, it's very hard to. I find myself on there too. I still have Instagram, and I love Legos, so I go down these rabbit holes of, oh, I want that Lego, I want that Lego. And I think where people get overwhelmed sometimes is because they're online too much, because they're anticipating the next Netflix show. It's like, oh my God, there's another season coming out and 10 episodes. I got to watch them all. And it's like, they're just so, the problem with online, there's so much stimuli. And when you try to go to work, there's a lot of stimuli. So there's no point in your day when you've actually calmed down, right? So one of the things that I do strategically in my day is I take a nap at lunch. I eat my lunch and I go sleep in my car, whether it's 100 degrees out or whether it's 10 degrees out. I've slept in both conditions. And it's sort of a meditation, and I've been doing it for years. And it helps me with a reset because the way I look at sort of my day, when I feel myself getting burned out, that's the time when you don't pull your phone out. That's the time when you like stare at a blank wall to just really reduce the stimuli. Because I think the problem with today, again, people are just they got fidget spinners, right? I mean, that's an invention now. People can't even sit with themselves. And I think that's where it really starts when people are feeling overwhelmed. You really need to ask yourself, can you sit with yourself? And I don't mean you got to do meditation and all that sort of stuff. I just mean just take a couple breaths. Like breathe in through the nose and then exhale through the nose. David Nestor, David or James, sorry, I'm drawing a blank now on the book Breath, but he basically stated that the ideal breath to, plenish all the like 37 trillion cells or whatever in the body is 5.5 seconds inhalation and 5.5 seconds exhalation. Now, I joke with yoga students, I don't know how you count half a second, but the point is count 5 or 6 seconds, right, on inhale and exhale. And I think that's really going to help people with if they're really overwhelmed, right? So that's sort of like the initial strategy when you're feeling overwhelmed. Now, I guess bigger picture, when you look at people kind of burning out, I've gone through places where the work culture, I'll say, was different than mine. I don't want to, I guess it sucks in some sense, but I've looked at work now as kind of like sports teams, right? So you've got the Red Sox, you've got the Yankees, in baseball, you've got Barcelona, and you've got Real Madrid in soccer. And the point is this, right? So every workplace culture is going to be different, right? So I think the biggest thing you have to ask yourself when you're feeling overwhelmed with your job and your work you're doing, is this a good fit for me in terms of the culture, right? And it might take a couple tries, right? I mean, I'm at a place now where I've gone from small companies to big companies to small companies, and there's been pros and cons with each. And let's face it, too, like over time, I guess it's almost like the call it like pleasure versus happiness. When you buy like a new pair of shoes, you're happy at first, but the happiness sort of like diminishes. So same too with a job, right? So how do you sustain that? And I think that really comes down to putting yourself in a good workplace culture.
Interesting. So again, you keep layering in all this stuff. So there's a few things I want to get into here. One is, I guess the first one is I'm always in search of these sort of mysteries of the universe. That's what I call it with my kids. But it seems like you're describing one of them, which is
Mhm.
um, people are listening to you and how much you do, and then you take time for yoga, and then you're napping in your car. Um, like LinkedIn, who is napping in their car? Like how many of you take naps during the day? Let us know. But but you're doing that while other people are feeling like it never ends, it never ends, it never ends, and they're just hustling to try to keep up. And you talked about the phone thing, and I want to get to that, but before we even get to that, is there a trick that by slowing down, you're actually, I don't know if I would say speeding up, even though that sounds better, but by slowing down, you're actually being more productive in some way?
Yep. No, love that. So I love Stephen Kotler's work, and he kind of built upon Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, the famous psychologist that studied flow. And so Stephen Kotler, in his book The Rise of Superman, talks about the four stages of flow. And I talk about this in my second book. It's recognized to me in the day. It's about recognizing where you're at in the flow cycle. Then you can kind of regulate the activities that you're doing to be efficient, if you will, if you want to use that term. So there's four steps or four stages. One is struggle, one is release, the next one's release, third is flow, and then the fourth is recovery. So going to my nap, I look at the nap time as either a release part of my day or recovery. So let's kind of build on that example with the flow state. So flow is kind of that experience when you're in the zone, right? The easiest kind of like scenario people have all kind of probably done or been through is when you're driving a car, right? You have this long road trip and you got the tunes blasting, and you're talking to your partner next to you, and what feels like minutes, it's really been hours that have gone by, right? So there's this time distortion. And in the workday, you can find these flow states actually more often than activities outside. That's why I picked in your 60 seconds thing office, because when I compartmentalize my work as work, I'm going to get a lot more done as opposed to when I'm at home. I got my cat running on me. I got my Legos that I want to build and whatnot. So back to the flow. The struggle part is where you're grappling with something, right? You're getting to the point where you're like almost getting pissed off almost with the work. This report sucks. I can't figure out this problem. This employee keeps coming into my office. What the hell am I supposed to do, right? So then it's like, okay, that's where you release, where you do a different activity. You say, okay, once the employee's gone, once you've gotten whatever the report mostly written or whatever, you do something else. You do a different topic. My favorite thing is to maybe walk around the facility. Then you come back to it, right? You have to finish the task at hand. And that's, again, what I like about work, because there's clear goals, right? And that's how it gets you into flow. It's an antecedent to flow, is clear goals. And so when you get back into the work that you're doing, then you have the potential to find a flow state. But what happens in flow states is it's so taxing on the brain from a neurochemical standpoint that you literally have to recover. And I think, again, the problem with people being overwhelmed is we're bombarding our brain with like dopamine, and we're just like constantly in this like flow, if you will, of give me more Netflix, more YouTube, my Amazon shopping cart, get rid of my, it's like it's unbelievable. So just again, the simple act of putting the phone away, taking deep breath, is you're going to be way more, again, I'll use the word efficient through your day.
I love that. You talked about the time audits, and I know some IOs who have done time audits for organizations, and I've personally done them for my kids, because it is insane how much time just gets lost. Transition times, phone times, screen times of all sorts. It just gets lost. Are you familiar with Cal Newport's Deep Work? He's got a
No,
book on
Cal
deep work,
Newport.
and then a follow up. I think it's Cal Newport. Um, but he talks about deep work, and in a lot of ways he's tapping into what you're talking about with. He talks a lot about the idea that as knowledge workers we need dedicated time. That is not disrupted, because we get disrupted so often. He's a big proponent of check your email twice a day, once at the beginning, once at the end, or
Love
put
it.
an away message on your text messages, even, something like that. So and you mentioned compartmentalizing, just with your cat. I've got 5 kids at home, and like I could really use that compartmentalizing. In real terms, if we were to look over your shoulder and look at your calendar or your to-do list, or whatever other apps or systems you use, what do those systems look like? How can somebody be as mindful and compartmentalize in the way that you do? What exactly do you do in real terms to make sure that this can happen for you?
No, I love it, David. So, with my engineering background, right, to me, it's all about systems. There's a saying in the aerospace industry as for quality people, it's say what you do what you say. And basically, what it means is when you're going to say what you do in a procedure, and then the whole point is that you do what you say to the procedure, right? It sounds simple, but obviously it's very complex and gives me job security in some sense. Um, so when I look at my day like that, so my calendar has gone through a lot of different iterations over the years. I worked with Stephen Kotler's group in the Flow Research Collective, where I really kind of took my calendar to another level, where I actually was engineering flow into my day, if you will. So the calendar, I really rely on it every day. And people will ask me, like, why are you so structured? Right. And it was kind of like well, I told them like the reason why I'm so structured is that basically when I'm doing the activity that I know that I've scheduled my rest of the day to have these other things. So I can just focus right into that activity, right? So from 7 to 3:30, I've got my, hat on to be the quality manager, whatever. Then from, 6 to 7, I've got my yoga hat on, right? So that's why I love the structure because when you can compartmentalize it and, put these times in your day, now you can say to yourself, okay, these are kind of the big rocks that I have to do. And you can just focus on it right away. The other thing that I like to do is I love Google Calendar. I think Outlook has it as well. But at the top of each day, there's different tasks, right? So I have a couple repeating tasks, like book editing, podcast editing. And then there's other things that I like to add in there, right? So it might be like, the show, right? The show's on for today, do interview with David Sharp. And what I like about that is what I learned from the Flow Research Collective is when you're checking off things on a list, you're getting that kind of like reward for the dopamine, right? This kind of a reward. And that's will help me with, okay, this is promoting that good behavior, right? And people will ask me too, like, okay, well, how do you schedule time with, your girlfriend and your family? Well, that goes in the calendar too. And the reason why I do that, so last weekend, my niece turned 2, this Barney themed, party that we went to, I scheduled for a good chunk of that day to be with them. So I wasn't worried about my phone. I wasn't worried about my homework getting done for my PhD program or whatever else. I knew that I had this time to just be with my niece and my family.
Interesting. And I love this piece of scheduling in that time with your girlfriend even. I remember early in my marriage reading this marriage help book, self-help book thing, and it talked about scheduling date night. And I remember
Yes.
thinking that seemed like the least romantic thing in the world. And as if the author, I forget what the book was called, it was many, many years ago, but um so I don't remember who the author was, but it was almost like they were reading my mind because they said this is actually the most romantic thing that you could do. And it really made sense to me once I thought about it through that frame. Um, Everything that's important in your life you put on your calendar. So if you're putting
Correct.
date night on the calendar, that's actually a sign that you find this to be important. I'm naturally very spontaneous, so I thought the opposite was true. But the truth is that ever since putting date night on, that was like a sign that it's important to me, and then it ends up getting done. um
No, I love
I
that.
with my ADHD mind, I don't I love the idea of color coding your calendar and time blocking. I use something called Restream, which
Mm.
uses AI to kind of you put in there all of your important tasks, your most important tasks, and also your habits, and it will find the time slots and do it. And I just take it like that is my day. The Restream gods say that's my day. That's my day. They don't sponsor this, but if they want to sponsor anything, I'm their biggest fan, so I would totally do
Love
it.
it. Love it.
So any of you who are watching this either live or the recorded version, let us know what you do to compartmentalize your day, or if you don't and are brave enough to tell us that too. No judgment. This is a no judgment zone. But there's still so much going back to what you had said before. And part of that is um, the the slowing down part. really seems to um, help you like compartmentalize this stuff. And what stage of flow did you say that was?
Yeah, so looking at it from, release or recovery, those 2 stages where I'm slowing down, if you will. Yep.
Now, during that time, when you are releasing or recovering, is that a nap or sitting quietly by yourself? You know, I'm not gonna throw out a name, but somebody I'm very close with, when she comes home from work at the end of the day, she hides from the kids and me in the bathroom. And we'll just sit in the bathroom
Yeah, there you
and it's
go.
just bathroom
Yeah,
time. Don't even come close to that
yeah.
room. She just needs to decompress. Um, but are some of the activities that you do, are those part of your rest and recovery? Like, is drumming or yoga, like, does that fit that box? So it's actually
Abs
you're doing something, but you're actually not doing something. You're recovering by the through the action.
That's a great question, David. So we refer to that as what's called active recovery. So yeah, so in that sense, yoga can be a form of active recovery to the point where you've been doing it long enough, right? If you just take a yoga class and you're like, "What the hell is this?" You're getting all pissed off. You can't do it. Obviously, you're not going to be calming down from that. But if you've been practicing long enough, then that could help with an active recovery. And same thing with drumming as well. But I do want to say, like, because you asked kind of like the tools, and the other one I wanted to kind of quickly mention here was I love the use of whiteboards. So I've got whiteboards in my office, at home, I got them all over the place. And the reason why I like that and is that I forget I think it's a word jumble, right? From the newspaper years ago. And I just remember someone telling me this trick. If there was a 5-letter word that you had to like unscramble, the trick was you lay the letters out in a circle, right? And what that does is your mind, it allows it to first off like relax, like, oh man, this is such a mess. How do I get this thing to fix this problem, if you will, solve it? But when you treat it as in the circle, you can start to make connections. The brain it can make connections quite easier. So what I like to do on the whiteboard when I'm struggling with something, when I'm overwhelmed, I put kind of the big like topics on the board, right? And even so if it's a little like sensitive when I'm working with personnel that's reporting to me or people, I do this on my computer so they don't walk in and see it. But I'll put it up there and it allows my brain to kind of make connections. So the activity of just like moving the information around is also kind of a form of release for me as well. It's kind of like less expectation of me solving the problem in that moment. It's almost like, think of like when you're building a puzzle, right? You're like, oh, where does this stupid piece go? And then you kind of move them around, you look at the box and you say, okay, and then okay, now you find it, right? So that's kind of how I look at that.
Interesting. So that requires sort of that structure with flexibility in a way.
Mm.
So very cool. Okay, back to your PhD. So you are kicking butt, work, books, all these things that you're working on, and then you decided that you wanted to go get your PhD. Why?
Yeah,
As
I
somebody
know,
who's
right?
been down that path, why? But also, was there is there some sort of answer that you're trying to get at? Is there something that you are trying to find? I know you need that to get the piece of paper at the end, but is there a drive to answer some unanswered question for you?
Yeah, no, there is. Yeah, along, I guess, with a piece of paper too, right? In
It
some
doesn't
sense. But
hurt.
no, I've been loving the journey so far. But so Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, his original work on flow, he discovered what was called the paradox of work. And basically, when he did his study years ago, like in like the 80s or 90s, and he found that people at work, again, so work has the potential to give these flow states because to get into flow, there's 3 antecedents, 3 things that we need. We need clear goals, immediate feedback, and your challenge to skill ratio balanced. And work is a great provider of that. That's why I love the term work, because I'm a flow junkie, as Stephen Collar puts it. But when he asked Mihai, the participants after this study, where they would rather be at work or doing things outside of work, time and time again, they would say outside of work. And so I was fascinated with that. And he called that the paradox of work. And because, flow states, you can correlate to happiness and, well being and all these great things, right? And so why wouldn't we want to be doing work? And so he, in his, first book, he talks about, the psychic entropy and, people don't want to be there because their goals aren't aligned to that of the company, right? And that's sort of an interesting thing. So I've been following, I don't know the gentleman's first name, it's Waterman at all the paper 2023. I keep citing it over and over again in my homework assignments. But that group replicated the paradox of work with a bunch of students. And what they found was it's really intrinsic motivation that's lacking. We have too much extrinsic motivation today. And so my curiosity and what I sort of love is that in any work that I do, yoga, quality, books, or whatever I'm doing, I just love seeing people as potential. And, how do we get them to grow, right? And I don't mean bigger, right? Bigger isn't better. I don't mean anything like that. I just mean so people can flourish and really enjoy what they're doing. So the PhD is allowing me to, kind of like learn the skills. I want to do this, quantitative approach to it. And just to show from whatever statistics means and psychology, I'm still trying to wrap my head around what that what that means. But that's kind of was the motivator to do my PhD program.
So interesting. So this idea of um, fun and work being two polar opposites, to me it seems like a big chunk of that is just the attitude. I grew up with in a family where the
Uh,
mantra was attitude is everything. And that was really, so many life lessons like would bring us back to that. And anytime something brought us back to that, you better believe my dad was there to point it out. And now I find myself doing that with my own children. Um, but but attitude is a piece of it. So for sure, right? So what's your advice to employers, and what's your advice to employees to just shift the attitude?
Love it.
And even deeper than that, I think that there's, sometimes this advice: find work that you're passionate about. My personal bias is that I don't think that that's really the key. I think the key is be passionate, find ways to be passionate about your work, um, because the perfect job isn't out there, the perfect career isn't out there. What is your advice? Like, how do you change somebody's outlook,
The
from the
vocabulary.
leadership level and the employee level?
No, it's a great question, David. To me, it's about vocabulary, and there's kind of a joke now. So I have a few people reporting to me, and we'll have these kind of sessions where we review the performance and how they're doing. And again, I love the whiteboard. I even have a chalkboard because I found it. I'm like, this is hilarious. So we'll go to the whiteboard, we'll go to the chalkboard, and I'll tell them, write out. There's two columns that we list. We say positives and deltas. And why do I pick the word delta, right? Because everything is negative today. You go on the news, it's negative. Everything is negative. And I think you had said it, David, on the show where, burnout is contagious, right? Is that you kind of mentioned that? So to me, it's like you want to surround yourself with people that are using similar vocabulary. Again, I think back to sports teams, right? The Yankees and the Red Sox, they're doing the same thing. They're playing baseball, but they're saying it differently, right? So you want to find, again, the people that are speaking your language, but also become more aware of your own language. So, like, coming home from a long day, again, I get it. You got to go hide yourself in the bathroom sometimes. You got to go play the drums, do some yoga, right? But to me, we got to kind of audit ourselves on what are the words that we're using? Like, what are we angry about? What are we sad about? And when we can start to get clear on why we're angry and the words around that, I think that's going to really open up how you see things.
Nice. So language itself is a big, it's a good lever to change the way people
Your
feel
attitude.
things.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because if I keep
What?
saying that I'm like I'm terrible, I'm bad, I'm not gonna do this, I'm never gonna get done. We did this last week, whatever, flavor of the month. I mean, it's not gonna get done. Right. And I'm not saying go around like, yay, we're gonna do this, it's gonna be great. Like I'm not saying that either. Like some bunch of BS with the hoorah speeches like you had you had talked about. Like that
Yeah,
change initiative fails on its face. But
yeah. Like, have you ever seen these videos, or maybe you've seen it in person? The Walmart chant when they open up the store. I don't know if they still do
oh
these.
man,
I showed this to
that's
one of my classes when when we're talking about work culture, and they do this chant, and you can find these videos on YouTube, and the manager is really into it, and everybody else is like, it's 5 a.m. or whatever. They're like, they haven't even drunk their coffee yet, and this is miserable. Um, how do you walk that line in leadership where you're positive without being toxically positive, where you are trying to re-engage people in a disengaged world where it comes across as authentic and people buy it,
Love
and
it.
preferably without becoming a cult. There at the
Yeah.
last SIOP, the Society for Industrial Organizational Psychologists, they have an annual conference. Which are you going to be at the next one? It's in New Orleans. We'll
I
have to
didn't
make that
even.
happen.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Keep me
yeah,
posted
maybe.
on that.
So and all of you are invited too. So anybody watching. But there was a really interesting session where they were comparing like strong work cultures with like strong charismatic leaders to cults with cult leaders, and basically saying there's a lot of similarities here and maybe this isn't healthy. I frequently talk about how everybody rolls their eyes. I think you posted a clip of me saying this on your show, like rolls your eyes when you say work is family nowadays. Um, so as a manager, how do you get your positive outlook across and bring people on board without them feeling like this is manipulation or that you're some like this is hokey stuff? What how can you help your people along? Can you help your people
Yeah,
along?
no, I love that. That's a great question, David. So two things that I kind of approach it with. So one is lead by example, right? So in a manufacturing setting, it's sort of, you have the office people and the floor people. And to me, actually, per the AS 9100 requirements, the aerospace governing specification, support roles are really the office, which means the work is being done on the floor. So even though I'm in the office, I need to be on the floor, right? So some days I've dressed up. So I've worked at numerous foundries where we heat metal up to like 2,000, 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit to melt it, and then we pour it into these molds to make parts that go into planes. And I've dressed up. I've suited up. I've gone out there and pulled these frames out of 2,000-degree ovens and helped pour and cast. And what it does one of two things. One, it builds that trust, like you talked about, right? And then the other is it allows me to see what they're going through, right? Man, this sucks. Can we change this? And I get their feedback, right? And so I love that approach. And then the other thing that I'd like to do, so the first one is lead by example, so being out there with the team. The other one is to really educate them on the why. So when people show up to work, I really hate when employers say, "Oh, we can replace them." They're just, and it just kills me because you can't replace a person, right? Everybody has their own unique strengths and talents and skills. And especially today in this market, it's very challenging to bring in good talent and retain it, right? So to me, they're not stupid, right? Even though they're on the floor and the office people got their degrees, pieces of paper, right? Or whatever they think they're happy about, I still educate them on the why, right? So in terms of, as it relates to aerospace manufacturing, I'll go into the nerd science, but that allows me to not to be like, oh, I know all these things and you don't know Jack. That has nothing to do with that. I want them to be able to explain it and actually, get excited about how to explain it. So it challenges me to take these complex scientific like phenomena and say, okay, this is what you're doing. This is why you're doing it. And then all of a sudden, I've had, people come back to me like, Tony, now I know why I'm doing this, X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, that's amazing. So now I'm out there and we're able to use, again, it goes back to the vocabulary, right? I'm not just telling them to push a button. I'm telling them to push a button because when you push that button, it's going to do this transformation to the part. And that's why you're pushing the button.
Hmm. Yeah, and you've mentioned things that surround information and feedback multiple times now, and pointed to flow, feedback being this essential piece of flow. Sometimes people um, like the feedback piece is the scariest piece and the most negative piece that they get
Yeah.
from managers. Do you have any tips for leaders on how to give feedback and how not to give feedback, and how and I understand when you're talking about flow and feedback, that's feedback from the environment as well. It's not just traditional feedback from your leader, but giving feedback, to your employees. What does that look like? How can you effectively do that in a way
Yeah.
that
So it's
tends
going
to be
to, a couple
engaging?
things. No, that's a great question, David. So a couple things I think about. It really depends on the context for the feedback, right? So say we're on the floor and we're dressed up, we're casting, and something happens, right? So what I'd like to try and do, humor is a great tool if you can use it effectively. Sometimes it kind of can go the wrong way too, so you have to be careful when you're using humor. And I never direct the humor at someone, right? So when I'm giving feedback, what I'm trying to do is to make the person and myself separate from the thing that we're talking about, right? So that it requires me to understand the thing we're talking about. Again, being out there on the floor. But then when I can frame it as this third party problem, then it's less personal, right, for the person. So that's one kind of strategy that I think about with feedback. Make it less personal. Make it about the problem related to, in the context of the organization, the goals that you're trying to achieve. The other, if it's more personal, right? So I look at kind of like feedback from the business standpoint and then feedback from a, call it, personal growth standpoint. And that's where I kind of mentioned, bringing people into my office and I just let them talk, right? So there was an activity that I did with the group here, just maybe a couple months ago here. We had things, we weren't in harmony. Let's put it that way, right? So I said, you know what? Let's sit down in a conference room. What I'm going to do, I'm going to give you these sheets of paper. I had worksheets for them. And I had each column was, myself. I wanted feedback on myself, themselves, and then the other people in the department. That was a small department. And I said, okay, I want you to write the positives and the deltas for each person. And I want you to give them to me after whatever I said, 5, 10 minutes. So what I did was I went back to my office and I looked at these things and I said, okay, this person is thinking that they need to be this and whatever. The point is, like, what I was trying to do was to get them, I wanted to know how they were framing the problem, what they were struggling with in their own words. When I can see that, that allows me to use their vocabulary, go back to the vocabulary thing, to then explain why we need to do a particular thing. So I really think it's important for people, supervisors should not, I guess this is my tip, if you will, not come out of the gate and be like, you screwed up and you're not doing this right. It's more like take a deep breath, go out there, listen to the person first, digest it first, don't react, respond later to it. That's what I'd recommend for feedback.
What are your thoughts in terms of, you've mentioned, pretty horrible kind of management techniques as if you've seen them. Not going to call anyone out, but
Yeah, no.
where do you think that's coming from? Where do you think it's coming from that so many managers seem to struggle in so many ways, and then that seems to roll down to the frontline employees and their direct reports. What, like, why do we have such an issue with bad managers, and is there a way to fix that?
Oh man, that's a that's a good question. I guess like the first thought, again, going back to the sports analogy, not that I hate Real Madrid, but I'm more of a Barcelona fan when it comes to soccer. And I guess it just comes down to your style of play. And so what I mean by that is if upper management thinks that, driving fancy cars and yelling at people is the style, well, people look up to that and say, well, you're the manager, so I should be doing that, right? I need to emulate that because I want to be successful here. So I think it just really comes down to where you're working. But if that person's out of place, right, in that context, most of the time I look at it as an insecurity thing, right? So when people are out there yelling and doing all the bad things that we know and see in the memes of bad management, I look at that as like, okay, something's going on with this person. Maybe it's a personal thing. Maybe they don't know, right? Sometimes I realize that they just say these things and they don't even know what they're supposed to be doing. So it's almost like they're saying, look yonder, because I don't know what I'm doing. So
Mhm.
that's where I try to save face with the person and try to build up their confidence. That's why I love quality, because quality is all about, putting the procedures in place so everybody knows we're saying what to do so then they can do what they need, do what we say. So
Interesting. So a lot of it just comes from that inability to communicate again, and knowledge. Yeah.
knowledge of self, though, right? I don't even think it's, and yeah, the ability to communicate for sure. But I think it's like because people can't sit with themselves, and I just attribute everything back to the phone, whether it's right or wrong. I'm totally biased towards all that today for in terms of mechanisms with behavior now. But I just look at like people like they're swiping now for dates and like liking and not liking, and then they see a person. Well, you just practice that on your phone. You're going to do the same thing to the person. Like, oh, I didn't like that. You're going to write a bad comment
Right.
to them. You're going to, it's just like, yeah,
Yeah.
put your phone down.
Another great book, The Anxious Generation. I don't know if you've read
Oh,
that one.
that's a great one, David. I mean that's a great one,
Yeah,
especially yeah. A lot
great
of
book. It basically takes the author takes two like two halves of the book. One is that we're overprotective of our children outside, like in the real world, and we're underprotective of them in the digital world. And so half the book is talking about things like why these younger generations are more anxious, their relationships don't work, all these different issues that we see, and how it comes back to overuse of those phones.
so that's why when you asked me in that 60 seconds things, which I loved, I think it's like the workplace culture. What do you view it as, and where's it heading? I said scary, because to me, we haven't resolved how to use our phones, and worse off. And I feel bad for parents today trying to figure out when do I give my kid a phone. And the anxious that book you mentioned has a chapter on when to give your kids a phone and certain things, which I love. Right. And that's why I say it's scary today, because they don't have the social skills that you're alluding to, right? They're not learning them because they're on their phones. They don't know how to talk to people, right? And that's why I think it's scary.
Right,
It's going to be
right.
scary, scarier.
Right.
So
So, but the author also says that, in that chapter where he's talking about giving when to give the kids the phone, he also pulls it. It's funny, this is becoming about the anxious generation, but only as a metaphor of what we're talking about, because he says in that chapter, you should give the internet at this age and social media at this age or whatever. And he points out in that same chapter that some of this stuff only works if the whole community does it together, and how difficult it is if your kid is the only one who doesn't have access to the phone at 12 or whatever it is. Um so that brings me to this question using the same logic. A lot of what you're saying is, yeah, like put away the phone, compartmentalize. Hopefully you have bosses that respect that. What if you don't? What if you're listening to this and you've been working for 10 years, you're making good money, but you're on call all the time, you feel exhausted, you are completely disengaged, dispassionate about your work, and you feel dead inside just generally. And so much of this crosses over too. Like, maybe it starts at work and goes home, or vice versa. What would you say to somebody like that if they need a reset? They're watching this because we said we're gonna tell them, what work is good for, and what they could do about these issues. What would you say to them? And
I
I
think it
and I know
comes.
it's got to be specific to the specific person, but in a general sense.
No, I love it. It's great. So I think the first thing that comes to mind is expectations, right? So one of I hate a lot of questions, by the way, that I get asked, like, what do you do and where do you see yourself in 5 years? Because I mean, we don't know. I truly go back to the fact that when I wake up each morning, it's just a gift to be alive, right? I don't mean that to be all flowery and crap. That's just the reality of it. um, but expectations, like with where you're at. So say that's the person with 10 years, at this job, they're bored. It's going to come down to, again, what do you value, right? Because let's face it, no company is going to be perfect, right? Even where I'm at now, where I've been, there's pros and cons to everything, and life just changes, right? You meet different people, you might have a family, whatever, your house, something happens to it, you got to pay more in the mortgage or whatever. So I think it's like, I think to kind of answer that, you really have to, again, it goes back to sitting with yourself and what do you expect, right? Are you truly doing the job for the paycheck? Are you doing the job because it feels like family? Are you doing the job because for whatever reason, right? And I think when you start tapping into that, and I guess I want to add one more thing to that. One thing that I kind of get frustrated hearing is that when people get sick of their 9 to 5, they immediately think, oh, I want to be an entrepreneur because you know what? That's like the opposite. And let me just go do these entrepreneur things and go, sit on an island drinking my, mixed drink. And it's like my brother, one of the first episodes I did on my show, Work Sucks, But I Like It. He talks through like he's got a family, he's got his own business. And he's like, it sucks. It's like very hard to break out the life and work because that's his everything. So that's why I said, one of your questions before, in the 60 seconds things was I would rather be at work in office because again, it separates what I'm doing. Imagine an athlete, right? Where, you're playing soccer, okay? You don't play I guess you could play soccer in the living room, but you go to the stadium, right? That's where you do the work. And on top of that, right? These athletes are doing the work within the 90 minutes. And one of the things that's very frustrating with managers and workplace culture sometimes is that, oh, well, outside of 9 to 5, you got to check your email. Well, why? Because an athlete doesn't go back to the stadium after the game is done and shoot the ball in the net and say, I've scored. That doesn't count. Like you've already missed your opportunity. So to me, 9 to 5 is the opportunity to do all the good work to get it. So yeah,
Well, wait, isn't the athlete in the gym and on the court
that's
when they're
true.
not?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And everything's feeding. I guess that goes back to kind of what you were asking me why I do all these things that I do. I guess to me, the stage, again, was it Shakespeare or whoever said, like, all the world's a stage, right? And again, I'm not trying to be all cliche and crap. It's really, I really view it that simply. The older, the more and more I experience this lifetime, I wake up and I'm just moving around and just interacting with people. And that's literally all it is. Obviously, there's other words you can put to it, but that's the expectation. And I like to keep it that simple.
So you seem like a very zen guy. Like this is just who you are. But if somebody wants to like that like there's this curse of knowledge almost like I know what I know and I've got my perspective and I've built it over time and I know that my job is always trying to take advantage of me and squeeze everything out of me and that and, like they just don't have a positive outlook like that. How like what can they do? Like what did yoga do this for you? Like is there something a specific activity that you do that kind of helps you find that
Yeah. So
center?
again, no, I love that. I like to think of it as like preventive maintenance, right? This culture is so all about like, okay, do things that's broke, let's fix it. Well, let's prevent it as we go, right? So the one thing I talked about throughout our, talk today was vocabulary. So let's get clear on being more positive with vocabulary. And then to build that vocabulary, take yourself to places like yoga places, right? They're not saying everything sucks, everything's negative. No, they're like, no, align your chakras. Like this is like so yes, yoga can certainly help. But as a yoga teacher, I'd like to remind students that what you learn off the mat, excuse me, what you learn on the mat, you can take with you off the mat. And again, that goes back to why I like to do a lot of different things because I can learn, through yoga how to calm down. I can learn through even at work, I can learn ways to calm down. And so that's why they're all sort of the same to me.
Nice. And then you have all of these compartmentalized pieces of your life that it turns out aren't 100% compartmentalized because you're bringing yourself into it and the lessons that you learn are crossing over. uh, I love that brings it really full circle. um, but I can't let you leave because we said we without this question eventually I can let
Yeah.
you
No,
leave
you're good. You're good. I
but
love it. I love this.
when we're talking about redefining work today, I don't think I cannot ask you the question about AI.
Ah.
What impact do you see this having right now and into the future? And how can people continue to have this sort of positive outlook on work despite or maybe because of the changes that are happening?
So the first thought that comes to mind. So my girlfriend teaches at a high school, and they know the kids are growing up with technology, right? It's the first generations that are have technology since they were born, right? I'm a millennial, so I didn't have that growing up as much as these kids now. And I guess what I wanted to go with this is that when they're doing assignments, they're going straight to ChatGPT. They're having it think for them. And so, yes, AI is a great thing. I use, AI to help me with some questions sometimes when I'm getting ready for a podcast. I've used AI to help, edit my abstract, for a book or whatever I'm writing. I've used AI to kind of be like another person to talk to. Hey, I'm trying to figure out with what the Chromeback alpha is and the psychology statistic tests, like can so I think like with AI, yes, is it replacing jobs? But let's face it, I mean, companies, in order to stay alive, they have to be changing. You look at phones, you used to have a switchboard operator, right? That's no longer a job. So I mean, to be afraid of AI taking over jobs, I think is a little too dramatic. But what I think when people think about AI, just remember that it's just a tool. It's just to help you, bring these pieces together of what you're trying to figure out in your life.
And so use it as a tool, not to replace your critical thinking, and be adaptable because
Yes.
things are changing. And if you are the switchboard operator, you better learn some new skills,
Some other
right?
skills, right, right, and what I do like about AI, right, is that, it's all about the question, right, that you're asking. Yeah, AI can do a bunch of different things, but it's the quality of the questions. So that's one thing that I do like when I use it. It's like you have to get skilled and asking the right question to give it, so you get the right answer, which I like, which is a critical thinking skill to me.
Yeah,
So,
I forget who said it years ago before we were all talking about generative AI. But they were talking about the smartphone, and they said that the smartest person in the room used to be the person with the best answers.
ugh,
But now with the smartphone that gets you all of the world's information with a couple clicks of a button back then, maybe, or a screen, um, it's the person with the best questions who's the smartest person in the room, right? Because we all have all the answers. We just need to know the best questions. So I love that phrase.
I'd love to add on to that. It's also the questions, but how do you use it to improve your life, right? Because that's another thing I see today too. We consume so much material, but we don't do anything with it, right? We don't seem to, like, how many people, there was a statistic, I don't remember. It's like 95% or whatever, you're indoors all week. Like,
Hmm.
that is scary. Like, I remember years ago, there was a commercial. This was years ago and back in college, like 15 or something years ago, whatever now. And, the kid walks out and looks up, and, the father's walking along with the kid. And he goes, Dad, what's that? And the father looks down at the son. And he goes, Son, that's a tree. So it's like people don't even look up anymore to see what's around them, right? They
Yeah.
just, to me, you got to go out and do things with the information you've got.
Well, I'll take you up on that as soon as the snow melts around here. That's
Yes. Well, I'm in New Hampshire too. So that's,
right.
yeah. We got snow. Yep.
Awesome. Well, Tony, this has been awesome. And I
Mhm.
feel like we need a part three. So if
Oh,
anybody
David,
has a
we're
podcast that wants to bring both of us on, then that'll be
yeah,
the next evolution of this.
yeah,
Um, but I want people to be able to reach out to you and continue this conversation because I know I need to continue this conversation.
we certainly
But if
will.
people want to reach you, that QR code above your head will get them to your work sucks, but I like it
Yep.
website and podcast. And the QR code above my head gets you to my link tree with all my separate links. How else can they find you and connect?
Yeah, LinkedIn, I mean, is a great place to connect. Anthony Tenaglier, and yeah, shoot me a message and I'll respond.
And where can we buy your books?
They're on Amazon. Yep.
On Amazon.
So,
So just search for your name.
yep. Yep. And
Awesome.
so I also have a website, Philosophical Engineering. I know it's a mouthful there, but actually, no, the books are linked in Work Sucks, but I like it as well. So if you want to check them out, so,
Perfect.
but thank you.
All right. That's awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for
Thank
being
you,
here.
David. No, thank
So
you.
much insight and inspiration all at the same time. Really appreciate
No,
you.
appreciate it.
Thank you all for tuning in. And if you're watching the
Thank you, everyone.
replay, make sure to say hi.